Good evening. I'm Doug Smith with Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, and we'd like to welcome you to this edition of Autism Hour with Miss Kimberly Howard from the Kentucky Autism Training Center. Thank you and have a good evening.
Hi. So today we're going to walk through different areas of our sensory system, and we're going to talk about how those might be, how can we make adjustments for those and make accommodations for those in the classroom. Today we're going to jump into the middle of this training. So last month's was recorded, and you can access that through KVEC. Last month we left off right at the vestibular system. The vestibular system, it coordinate the movements of your eyes and your head and your body. So eyes, head, and body definitely affects our balance system. So whether or not we can keep our balance, it will affect our muscle tone, because if you don't have good balance, then it's also very possible that you may have poor muscle tone because you will be frightened of moving, right? If I have had issues with my with vertigo before, where my inner ear gets a little bit off and it feels like the whole world is spinning. And if I tilt my head a certain way, it feels like I am on a roller coaster. It is the most, it's a very not fun moment in life, is what I will say. I had never experienced that before until once I hit my 40s, my body was like, oh, let's try this out for fun. And it affects your emotional security, right? If you don't know that you can keep your body's balance, your emotions can become a little bit upset. I was personally a little bit upset. So the book on this page is called The Out of Sync Child Has Fun. I personally really do like that book. You can find it. It's been out for several years. I have seen this for $1. The book costs $1 at like Half Price Books or a thrift book type store. It's been out for many, many years now, but it has a list of different activities that you can do. It is somewhat geared towards home, but there are things that I have done with this book in my classroom as well. So just know that that's out there. So what can we do for our vestibular system? Well, if we want to calm it down, then we can try things like swinging. If you are blessed enough to have a single point swing, that is really fabulous for your vestibular system. And there are actually some specific ways that you can swing in a single point swing. Rocking, jumping on a trampoline, or an obstacle course. If you want to alert them, you might spin in a chair. You know how much kids like to get in your adult chair and spin. Maybe standing and twirling. Does anyone happen to have a toddler? I will never forget when my son was toddler age, he would bend over and put his head on the floor and look backwards through his legs. So that bend over with your head between your legs, it is something that we do as a part of natural child development. And so he was learning how his vestibular system works, right? He was trying that out, bending over and looking backwards through his legs. So if you have a toddler or have access to a toddler, watch for them to do that. It's a pretty cool thing. I remember as a parent being like, yes, he's got a vestibular system. Here he goes, bending over and looking backwards. Somersaults and cartwheels if they're able, jumping in a bouncy house or trampoline. And there are lots of other options. These are just a few that you might try out in your classroom. And we're going to talk about lots of things as we go. So our tactile system. So it's your touch and texture. So it's the touch of your skin, right? Everything of your body, including the skin inside of your mouth. And which is the mouth is its whole own system. But how do we work around our tactile system? So if we want calming activities, then we might try a weighted vest or a weighted lap pad. And I will say last time when we started this, I shared that when we're working with a child's sensory system, this is a great place to partner with an occupational therapist, right? We are working with the sensory system affects the child's brain. So you must I would say, proceed carefully If I am working with things like weighted vest and weighted lap pads, here are the protocols that you have to have in place for the safety of your students. So a weighted vest or a weighted lap pad should never be heavier than 10% of a child's body weight. It should not ever be heavier than 10%. So if a child weighs 50 pounds, then their weighted vest should not be heavier than 5 pounds, right? Or their weighted lap pad, whichever one it is. It shouldn't be heavier than about 5 pounds. So 10% of their body weight. So if I weigh 200 pounds, then my weighted vest could weigh up to 20 pounds. It doesn't have to, but it could weigh up to that point. And I have to have a protocol, meaning I have to have a plan for when I am putting that weighted vest on and when I'm taking it off. Because if I wear it all day long, all the time, then eventually it loses its effectiveness. The protocol that we had in our classroom was we had a plan for the child was going to wear the weighted vest while they joined us. They came to the round table and they were working with a small group of other people. They would wear their weighted vest for that 30-45 minute activity, and then they took it off for about 30-45 minutes to an hour, and did other things, and then they might put it back on for another activity, right? So you have to have a times that they're taking it on and they're taking it off. Now, I have had students that would wear their weighted vest all the time, and I could not get them to take it off. It was almost like a security blanket. In that case, I'm not going to make them take it on and off, because for those students, it was extremely upsetting to take that weighted vest off. I just know in reality as a teacher, your body adjusts to that weight, and it wasn't going to work as a calming activity for them anymore. It was just going to be a part of their wardrobe at that point. And it was like a whoopee, right? It was their security blanket, and that's not wrong either. It's just not going to be an effective sensory tool anymore at that point. Other calming activities for tactile. So we're going to touch things, right? We're going to play with putty. We might do deep pressure activities. So here is a deep pressure activity that you can try. Now, if you don't have carpal tunnel, if you have wrist problems or carpal tunnel, don't do this. But if you do not have carpal tunnel or wrist problems, put both of your hands together. Put both of your hands together and then gently press towards the hands. So when you gently press, you shouldn't feel pain, right? If you feel pain, stop. As you gently press, you are pressing into your wrist and into your elbows, and that is putting deep pressure. There are several different deep pressure activities that I've seen be done with students. I've seen some that they get squished with a ball, or there's many deep pressure activities, and we'll talk about some of them as we go across several of these. But deep pressure activities, you always want to be conscious of. You're not pushing too hard, you're not pushing too soft. That's why some of these are good to have a partnership with your occupational therapist. So alerting activities for learning, fidgety items. I just bought some really cool fidgety items called, let me see if I can pull them up, called calming strips. I had not seen them before. I'll let you know if they work out. They are very tactile, and they will stick. They're kind of like stickers that can stick on your phone or stick on you could stick them on any item. My thought was that teachers could stick them onto the bottom of desk. I love fidgets. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm a firm believer in fidgets, but I'm also was a classroom teacher, right? I was a classroom teacher for many years before I came to work for Kentucky Autism Training Center. And when I was in the classroom, fidgets can also become a weapon of mass destruction. I mean, it can be tossed or it could become a giant distraction, which makes it really hard. So I found in my classroom that if that was an issue for me or for a student that I was working with, then I could take a fidget and stick it to the bottom of their desk. So for me, some of my fidgets were a cut piece of cloth that I taped to the bottom of the desk, and they could rub their finger back and forth. Or I took a piece, the Velcro, and I split the Velcro open, the soft side and the hard side, and I put it to the bottom of the desk, and they could run their fingers back and forth across that, whichever, if they preferred this hard or they preferred the soft, maybe they like both. And it was Other kids didn't see it. I did it, I did it at the end of the day after all the other students went home. And it was a much more effective fidget for many of my students, especially those that were out in the regular classroom. Light touch is alerting. Cold, so cold touch, maybe an ice pack or a popsicle. We talked about tactile system. A part of that is the inside of your mouth. So a cold popsicle, a cold drink of water is a great alerting activity. I know if you've made it this far into life, we probably are all having a cold drink of water at 3:43 in the afternoon. Those are all places that you could start with your tactile system. All right, olfactory, or our sense of smell, is definitely a system that can affect our students and affect us too. We all have smells that we prefer or smells that we do not prefer. I have had students be super olfactory. They have really strong senses of smell. And that can be very difficult because they are kind of made sick by other people's body odor, or the smells in the lunchroom may make their stomachs, turn because they have a hard time blocking out that smell. So some of the things that you can try, especially if you have students who are seeking out smells. I work with a student who loved smells. It was one of the things that she sought out, and she wasn't always sensory appropriate or not socially appropriate. And so she would smell you, whether you would like that or not. And so one of the things that we did in my classroom was provide her with, we called it her box of smells. And so it was one of her reinforcers. And it was also a part of her sensory diet. So there was a couple of ways that she could get access to it. And so we kept a box of plastic spice jars and had, maybe we kept some of those spices, but we pulled out some of those spices and dropped scented oil or other scents onto a cotton ball. She liked, I'm trying to remember, she really liked peppermint. There was a few smells that she really did like a lot. You could try scented markers or crayons. You could try, we kept lotions for her. She could put on different lotions and we let her pick, right? We weren't picking for her necessarily. Calming scents, generally calming scents, are that vanilla, rose, lavender. And alerting scents, if we want to go to the alerting side, tend to be that citrus, mint, or cinnamon. Now, this may vary. Your mileage may vary on that from person to person. Or scratch and sniff stickers are also a great fun way to build in some ability to sniff things and smell things in an appropriate fashion. So breathing, as I take a deep breath, breathing is really important. And so breathing is one of the things that we tell our students as soon as somebody starts becoming upset, or if I'm becoming upset, I think in my head, all right, I need to take a deep breath here. I absolutely need to take a deep breath and see where we go. So some things that we have found and that we know is breathing is important for brain activity, right? I need that oxygen to get to my brain so that I can have functional thoughts and thinking and the thought processes that I need. But for many of our students, they do not know how to breathe appropriately, or they might be living in fight, flight, or freeze mode, which means that their body is, shutting down and they are very upset or very terrified. So some of the things that I have done with my students, old students, young students, blowing bubbles, and not the automatic bubble blowers, make them blow their own if they're able at all. Blowing on pinwheels. For my older students, we have used straws. So just your regular plastic flexible straws, not a metal straw, not a hard plastic straw. So think McDonald's straw, the kind that's bad for our ocean, I know. Hard straws could be accidentally pushed through a child's upper palate of their mouth, right? So we want to be conscious of that safety risk there. But with a flexible straw, if they fall forward, it's just going to bend and it's not going to damage them. So a flexible straw, some of the things that I've done in my classroom are taking that straw and cutting it in half or leaving it long. It depends on if I want them to have to blow harder or have a little bit easier time. And then I have blown the little chenille balls. If we were in person, I would get these things out and we would practice some activities with this. I had my students blow. We did this as a fun thing, and I would set them up 3 in a row, and we would do it as a race. They would try to blow the ball across the finish line, see how hard they could blow. So you have to take that deep breath and then blow. Some of the other things that I've done is we are learning a color or alphabet or sight words or something, and I set it up on the table on an index card, and I have them blow towards it. Hey, blow the chenille ball over here to the sight word that says my. Hit my, hit the my, or hit can, whatever word it is. So thinking about how do we get kids to breathe, and where do we go with that? So auditory, how do we process out what we hear? And that's a metronome on the screen. Metronomes are pretty cool. If you are a music person, you probably have used a metronome before, and they make a wonderful tick, tick sound. There is some research out there that says you can set a metronome. And if you are learning kind of rote memorization type stuff like sight words, or maybe it's multiplication tables or other basic facts that you're just going to hard memorize them, then you can set yourself a rhythm and kind of get in a flow with that tick, tick, and it will help the memorization. Other things for auditory and calming, listen to that quiet, steady sound, something with an even beat. So if you can put some music on, I know a lot of teachers that use this. If you have students that hum to themselves, anybody have students that hum? I definitely have seen a lot of hummy students over the years. They are self-calming. It's kind of a self-soothing thing. If you need to block out noise, you could use those noise canceling headphones. You can order those, or you can find those in your hunting department. You can buy those types of noise canceling headphones are exactly the same as what you would find in a special education catalog, only they're going to be much more reasonably priced, probably $15 and under versus $50. Maybe they need to go to a quiet environment to complete their schoolwork. Maybe you're using soothing nature sounds like a fish tank or running water. I used to play some music that had, fish swimming and things like that, showing scenes of nature for my kids some days. If you want to be alerting, then you want loud music with a varied beat or novel sound. Speak with an animated voice and go up and down in loudness. Those things will help keep your kids' attention, especially if it's like now and it's kind of that end of the day and everyone is kind of zonked. So our visual processing system is how we process what we see. And we use this, hopefully, if we have our vision, we're using our visual acuity a lot. So calming, if we're trying to calm down, turn down those lights or turn off the lights if that's appropriate. Maybe wear sunglasses. If you're in a classroom that's very busy, lots of things on the wall, lots of shelves with tons of items, maybe you're covering some of those with a shower curtain or just some sort of shelf cover so that there's not so much visually to see. Use natural lighting when possible. The lighting system that we have in our schools tend to be not very good for our students. Those overhead fluorescent lights are not great for humans. We know this, but it is what it is. So if you're lucky enough to be in a classroom that has a nice window, take as much advantage of that natural light as you can. Maybe you have a distraction-free desk. Maybe you are a teacher who loves lots of decorations and lots of things, but maybe you just keep a corner or a desk that is in a slightly less loud visually area. If you want to alert, go bright colors, bright paint on the wall, bright lights, all of those things will be alerting if that's what you're looking for, if you have a student who needs alerting. Now, maybe you're not sure what your student needs, and that is very possible. I have met a lot of students that I'm not 100% sure what they need. So when you don't know, go to Heavy Work, and we'll talk about what Heavy Work is. Heavy Work is just a great go-to tool for a variety of needs. So Heavy Work might be pushing a wheelbarrow, hanging from a monkey bars, crawling around on your hands and knees. It could be pushing against a wall. So has anyone ever done wall push-ups? So wall push-ups are where you walk over and stand next to the wall and you put your hands out and you are doing push-ups just with your upper body against the wall. You might also, if you're in a classroom, we did chair push-ups. So I'm not in the right kind of a chair, but in a chair push-up in a classroom, you put your hands just slightly under your bum and you literally push up. So you're lifting your own body weight. That's a really great activity to have any of your students in your classroom do that has the physical capability. It's a great calming activity. It's a great getting our minds back on track. You just do a few of them. They don't have to do 100. Maybe they do 3 or 5, just something to give that. And the cool thing is when we do those wall push-ups or when we do those chair push-ups, we're giving deep pressure all the way up our wrist, our elbow, into our shoulders. We're giving that deep pressure. So I've had teachers that do chair push-ups right before they do a writing assignment. I have seen younger kids use cut out cardboard or heavy paper with scissors. It could be things like wiping off, if you have a whiteboard still. It used to be wiping off the chalkboard, right? If you have a whiteboard or a chalkboard, it could be holding a heavy door. In my classroom, we had a thing, I had it set up. I had set up some activities of heavy work for a student, and I'm going to tell you about it next in this section. So how use all of this information to support my student or students, because that's really our goal today, is to support those students in their learning. So a sensory diet, and this doesn't necessarily mean food. Every time, when we say sensory diet, people think instantly food. It could have food involved or it could not. A sensory diet is regularly planned sensory-based activities within the context of naturally occurring activities or routines, and with the goal being that you are helping the child meet their sensory needs throughout the school day. So you have less opportunities for meltdowns or blowups. So let me talk to you some about sensory diets that I have done with my students. So my heavy work routine sensory diet, I had a student that he held together pretty good most of the day. But when he got to afternoon math class, he was out in the regular education classroom with his peers, and academically, math-wise, he wasn't quite on level, but he was very close to the same level as his peers. And he needed to participate in that math class. Unfortunately, math for him was in the afternoon, about 2 o'clock in the day, 1:30 in the day. And it was not, the timing of it was very poor for him. And so he was pretty much done by that point in the day. And so we figured out that we felt like we needed to give him some sort of heavy work activity to help him pull himself back together, because he was going to math class and he would get very fidgety and he wasn't participating and he wasn't doing the work, even though we knew that he was able to do the work. And so what we did put into place was right before math started, his regular classroom teacher would give him a note, just a sticky note that was folded closed, and he would walk that, and he would put on a backpack and carry a box down to the school secretary. Now, we had prearranged this with the school secretary. The box had about 5 pounds of books inside of it. He weighed about 50 pounds. And so we wanted this heavyweight activity to be about 10% of his body weight. And we wanted him to get a walk. So we're 2-timing here, right? We're sending him for a walk and we're having him carry something heavy. So he didn't know that this was just a box that the secretary didn't need. We told him we just needed him to take this to the secretary, and here, use this backpack to haul it. So some of the things that we did. So when he got to the secretary with his backpack and his books, she would say, "Great, thank you." And he would put that on the ground, and then she would hand him a stack of magazines or hand him a stack of something that was pre-planned that he would carry back up to the teacher. We did this for a whole entire school year. And it really made a difference. It gave him a short walk. He could do that walk independently. Thankfully, he was a student that we could trust to take his own self. The teacher would remind him, hey, get a drink of water on your way back if you want one. It gave him a walk. He carried some heavy weight, and it helped him in his math class. When he got back, he was better organized, and he was able to listen and participate much better than he had been previously. So other things that you might do on the screen, you see this when I have to go to lunch, I can do these activities. So before they go to lunch, they're going to do a heavy work activity. During lunch, they're going to listen to quiet music. So they've got some kind of headphones on to cut down on that lunchroom noise. After lunch, they're going to come back and do a deep breathing activity. A sensory diet could be as formal as that. Many times my students that have a sensory diet, it's a part of their daily schedule. I don't call it sensory diet. It's just something that we do. Some of the sensory diet activities that I've had over the year, I had a student that sought out deep pressure through physical aggression. Part of her sensory diet was every morning at 10 o'clock, she ate pudding through a straw or applesauce through a straw. If you've ever sucked pudding or applesauce through a straw, you'll know that's very hard to do. If you've ever drank a thick milkshake, right? A thick milkshake, it gives you deep pressure into your jaws, and she happened to be a biter. And so that was one of her sensory items that we did. We also did pounding Play-Doh. We did structured learning. And so she did shoebox task or structured work task. One of her structured work tasks that went in her box 2 times a day was an activity of, it literally was dots, blue dots that I had used a Microsoft Word, and I had just chose blue shapes. So sometimes there might be 5 blue dots spaced out on the page. Sometimes there might be 7 blue dots. And I would make up Play-Doh balls, make up 5 or 7 Play-Doh balls. And so her job, that work activity, was matching those blue dots. So she would put 1 Play-Doh dot on 1 blue spot. And so she matched. And so then it's 1-to-1 correspondence, right? That was one of her goals, was 1-to-1 correspondence. And then she pounded the Play-Doh. She would smash it with her hand because she smashed people with her hands on a regular basis. And so we had to give her access to still smashing things that was much more socially appropriate than the people that she was around. So sensory diets can look like many, many different things. They could be all kinds of activities. It's meant to be what's appropriate for that student and what's appropriate for you in your setting. So just know that it's a great place to get some help. And I always tell people it's activities across the course of the day. So if a student does really great, maybe they do really great in the morning. Maybe they don't need, maybe they have a minimal amount of sensory activities, 1 or 2 in the morning, but maybe their activities, their afternoon, they have much more issues. So maybe you're really planning lots of sensory breaks. Not even so much as sensory breaks. Her Play-Doh activity, we had managed to make that be a part of her academic stuff. Other things to think about when you are addressing and dealing with sensory needs. So if possible, give warnings during transition. Give kids that fair warning so that they know what is happening during different activities. Also, visual schedules are key so kids know what's coming, right? Visual schedules, use things like visual timers. We talked about the visual system. So this is one of those places that it's really good to build in some structure. And all of these are actually a part of antecedent-based interventions, right? So visual schedules, visual timers could be a part of that. Giving kids fair warning, telling them what's going to happen next also could be a part of that. Avoid taking recess or breaks. If they're older, do not take recess or breaks from kids that have sensory needs. They will, my experience in over 20 years of education is that our students who have sensory needs will probably lose their breaks, and they will be the kids who need their recess or their, if it's high school or older and it's like, your hangout break, whatever it is, they'll be the ones that lose that. But they're the ones who need them desperately. And I personally don't agree with having kids walk. I don't agree with having kids walk. We always talk about how coming to school is such a social experience. But recess and those breaks are the only time those kids have, most likely, it's the best opportunity in the day that they have the chance to freely socialize with others. And probably they're going to lose it almost every day. So now, if a child does something wrong one time and it does something wrong and you take they lose their recess and then they never do it again, then you did the right thing. But if a child does something wrong and you take the recess and then they do the same thing the next day, and so then you take the recess again and then you do the same, it's once we get into that, then it's not really helpful, right? It's not helpful for the child. It's not helpful for you because you're setting them up to fail. So that's my soapbox. I would never take a kid's recess. And I know it's really hard because teachers are like, this is the only thing that I have that I can use. And I would say find some sort of reinforcer, because if you're having to take their recess on a consistent basis, then obviously it's not working. It's not working for either of you. So that can be really difficult. And I will give you my email at the end and say you are welcome to email me, and I will gladly help you problem solve. Provide those fidgets. This is an example of a fidget under the desk. That is actually a piece of a mop that we have cut off. We've just cut a jagged strip off the end of it and then hot glued it to the bottom of that desk. It works pretty well. It stayed nicely for the whole year. It's not so visible to the other kids, and it's not something that can be jostled and tossed around. These are some of my favorite books for sensory needs. The Out of Sync Child goes deeply in depth. If you want to know all about our sensory integration dysfunction and what are our sensory systems, that is a great place to start. Picky Pete talks about a kid who has different sensory challenges. Sensitive Sam is another great book. Squirmy Wormy, How I Learned to Help Myself is a good book that talks through self-help skills for meeting sensory needs. And these are some of my other favorite books: Sensory Issues and High Functioning Autism Spectrum Related Disorders. So it's practical solutions for making sense of the real world. And then the yellow book is a buffet of sensory intervention. So it's lots of different ideas on what you can do to help your students meet their needs. I'm going to show you a couple of websites, and then don't go. I want to share a couple of things with you before. So I'm not done just yet. Understood.org is wonderful. The Incredible 5-Point Scale is a great place to go. Sensoryprocessingdisorder.com. All of these are really wonderful activities. So this is my email. So I do want to finish up this session by saying that I have worked with a lot of different kids with sensory needs over the years, and they may or may not have autism, right? You can have sensory processing needs and not have autism. My big points out of this would be, if at all possible, partner with your occupational therapist. And as you feel more comfortable, you'll be able to do more things with your students. Sensory needs can be hard, and I will tell you that meeting sensory needs for students is a little bit of trial and error. Sometimes it's a little bit of trying some things out and seeing, does this help or does it make it worse? So it's definitely good to have a partner. Definitely want to have a partner with that.
Thank you, Ms. Kim, for the information. I have to agree with you. The sensory processing needs and deficit that some of the kiddos we work with, they are hard to figure out what's going on, and then even more difficult to determine what are some strategies that I can use to help with that. And I think from the last session and this session, I've come up with some really great ideas and some suggestions I can give to folks out there that when I'm out in the schools and in our region. And I really appreciate your efforts and the information that you presented. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll share this story with you. Many years ago, not too long, it feels like longer than it was, but I had a student that was in a math class, and I don't know what it is about math, and he'd been going to class and he'd been doing really well. Different kid than I talked about earlier. He was doing really well. Everything was going well. And he was sitting with his friends and participating in math. And then one day, his there was an aide in that classroom because there were several students with disabilities in that classroom. The aide brought him back and said, he won't stay. He's in the floor. He's not talking, but I can't get him to sit in his seat. I don't know what's going on. And then after that, every day he started, refusing to go to math class, or we'd get to math class and then he'd be in the floor and we didn't know what was happening. And so my first thought was, is the math too hard? Maybe we've reached a level of math that this is really bad challenge, really big challenge for him. And we've leveled out and we need to make some more accommodations for him academic wise. Well, we looked at it and no, it didn't feel like that was the case. So we made a few adjustments to his workload, made it a little bit easier. And then we tried taking him back and no, he drops on the floor and we can't get him to participate. We move his seat around, or we look at, what's going on, what's changed. And so we tried several things. And you guys know, when you're dealing with behavior challenges, sometimes you are going down the list of things it could be, essentially. And so we'd gone down the list and I came to his classroom teacher after school and I said, hey, this date, I'm going to say January 20th up until the end, the whole school year, he's coming to class. Everything is going really well. What's different after January 20th? Help me figure out what's going on here. I need your detective skills. And so the teacher looks at me and she goes, well, that's right after my birthday. And I say, oh, okay, happy birthday. Okay, that's great information. I said, what changed? Did something in the class change? And she goes, well, we moved seats. And I said, oh, okay. Where was he sitting at before? Well, he'd been in the back and she moved him to the front. She moved everybody in the classroom. She just periodically moved people. And I said, okay. And I said, did anything else change? And she goes, no. And she goes, well, I got this new perfume. I got this perfume for my birthday and I just love it. And so she got it out of her desk and she sprays it. And it was really strong perfume. And and so I asked her and I said, well, can we try moving him back to the back row? Can we move him back towards the back of the classroom? We'll try that first. And we tried that and it didn't work. And then I found out from my classroom assistant that the kids were coming back from activity and the teacher was refreshing that perfume. And so when the kids came into the classroom, the perfume smell was very strong. And there's nothing wrong with perfume, right? There's nothing wrong with wearing perfume, but sometimes we have kids that they don't tolerate that. And this was a kid that did have some big sensory needs and he was very verbal. And I would have thought he would say, that stinks, or I don't like that smell, or like he would tell us verbally what was wrong. Instead, he's dropping in the floor and crying, or dropping in the floor and just refusing to work, and anything he could do to get out of that room. And so I came back to the teacher and I said, hey, I really, really hate to ask you to do this, but this child I really have this theory that maybe it's your perfume. Can you do me a favor and not wear that perfume just for a day or two? Let's see what happens. And I said, I'm so sorry. Your perfume smells really lovely. But it might be too much for him. And so she was very kind and very nice and agreed to that. And the kid came to class. He had literally been removed from the class almost every day for probably about 4 weeks at this point. And we had been trying really hard and I couldn't figure it out. And I was desperate enough to ask another teacher not to wear her perfume at that point. And so, I mean, because seriously, right? That's an awkward moment. And so she did not wear the perfume. And he came to class and he went and sat in his seat and he did his work. And so she didn't wear the perfume for a couple of days. And then I said, okay, wear the perfume. Let's see what happens, because maybe it's his mood. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. So she wore the perfume we didn't tell him any of this and we didn't talk about it around him. She wore the perfume and he fell on the floor again. And so we knew it was the strong odor of that perfume. So sensory needs can be hard, really hard to process out. So my email is kimberly.howard@kedc.org. I'm going to check for questions. Yeah, Doug put in the chat, our next session of this, our last session for this school year is May 16th. We are going to talk about universal life skills, or it's sometimes called preschool life skills. So if you're a high school teacher, some of it will apply to you. I'm going to share that with you. So it applies definitely hard for elementary age and preschool age, but he's changing the name. The gentleman that invented it is changing the name to Universal Life Skills because our students that fall into that MSD range, that are middle school and high school, often don't have these skills either. So I am done. If you have signed in and signed out for Doug and you don't have questions, I think we're all done. I'll hang on just for a minute in case somebody does. Have an awesome afternoon, guys.
Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks everyone for what you do at working with the kiddos in our region, and keep up the great work. Really appreciate every one of you. Thank you all.